Hello, my name is Andrew Ray. This is James Peisker. We're here at Porter Road Meats, Porter Road Butcher.
Porter Road.
We're here at Porter Road. James, what the hell is this?
This is a bunch of beef.
You're gonna walk us through some different cuts of cow here.
Yeah.
What's the proper term? It's not cow, steer.
So cows are mothers. In this country, we do eat them, but generally they are ground up and put into processed food. So here at Porter Road, we make sure that we only serve our customers the best, which are steers and heifers. So unbred females or castrated males. So what that does is it gives you a nice lean flavor, and it's that nice beefy, sweet flavor that we know and love so much.
What's the flavor difference between a steer and a heifer?
Steer and a heifer is actually gonna be a little sweeter and a little fatter.
These all have great fat and color, and I'd love to show folks at home what they can expect flavor-wise and how they should best prepare each one of these cuts of meats. In any particular order here?
It is actually, and I kind of tried to put it up to where we start at the front of the animal, so this is where his head would be. When you break down beef, you have 4 main sections that you do. So butchers actually go through and count ribs. It makes it a little easier for them and it standardizes it. So your 4 main sections are your chuck section, your rib section, your loin section, and your round, starting from the front shoulder and going down. So I tried to separate it out so we could kind of talk through it and you could understand why we look at certain cuts and why we cook certain cuts a different way. So when we were out on the pasture, we talked about development of those muscles, which builds the flavor and all that. Sometimes that's a wonderful, wonderful thing, but sometimes that's also bad because it toughens the meat. But by being wonderful cooks, watching your show and learning how to do all these great things, what happens is you understand a chuck roast, which is a shoulder cut, is gonna be a tougher piece of meat, but have so much great flavor, so we slow cook it. Because what we're trying to do in any of these tougher cuts that we're going through is try to break down that connective tissue, that collagen, and as we break it down, there's a point to where it will turn into gelatin. And that's when you have like that barbecue or that braise that just covers your mouth. It's lip smacking good. So if you can pull that off and not dry out your meat too much, then it's magical.
Yeah.
But the issue is, meat proteins start to dry out at 165 degrees. Connective tissue breaks down at a rapid pace at about 195 degrees.
What do we do?
So we slow cook it and we try to minimize that. So that's why sous vide is a great option from time to time. You can break down that connective tissue over a longer period of time at a lower temperature, so you still end up with a super moist juice chuck roast. Or another option, braise it in a liquid. Braise it in a stock that you made from it. Or on a smoker, you wrap it up, you add your Worcestershire sauce, apple juice, apple cider vinegar, you adding moisture back into it to make sure it tastes good. So what we'll do is we'll start at the front of the animal and kind of go down, and we'll go from there. Chuck roast, we kind of already talked about. That comes from the shoulder part. What we do here is we actually take the roll down, butterfly it out, and tie it up. What that is that's the eye. So that's the same muscle that goes down from the front to the tail of the animal. That muscle connects to this muscle, connects to this muscle, connects to this muscle. All the same muscle, but where you cut it from on the animal is gonna change the name and change the way you cook it.
Well, let's pretend I'm the cow and you hold it up exactly where it would be on me.
Right there, that's your chuck roast right there. So you can even see that, on your shoulder, that's always gonna be the tougher part. That's why we slow cook that.
Yeah.
Braise it down in a pot roast, chip beef on the smoker, delicious, wonderful stuff. So when you go to a bigger store, you get a chuck roast. What we do is start to separate that out. At Porter Road, we do something called seam butchering.
Yeah.
Try to utilize every last piece possible. So that's a Denver steak. So when we trim it down, that chuck flap, it becomes a Denver steak. It sits right underneath that chuck roll, and it's this big, beautiful piece. One of our longtime butchers here, the singing butcher, calls it butter meat because it's delicious, it's buttery, it's wonderful.
Butter meat, that sounds good.
Denver steak's also sold as boneless short ribs too.
So I think you already covered this, but best way to cook a Denver steak?
Best way to cook a Denver steak to me is just a hot pan. That's it. A little bit of lard or tallow in the skillet, grapeseed oil maybe, salt and pepper, that's it.
Do we need to slice across the grain?
Against the grain, always. That's every single piece of meat that you ever cook.
Yeah.
So whenever we cut against the grain, we're using the knife to do what our jaw is gonna do eventually.
Pre-chewing the meat.
Pre-chewing the meat, exactly.
Delicious.
Same thing with cooking. We're pre-chewing the meat because we're denaturing the proteins in one way or another. So this one's called a flat iron. So this lives right under the scapula. So your paddle bone. About 30 years ago, we figured out if we separate this muscle off, there's a giant piece of silver skin that lays down the middle of it. So a skilled butcher must take their knife, run it down the middle, and you end up with these 2 1-pound pieces of flat iron. This cut right here is the second most tender cut behind this cut right here.
Yeah.
But it's in the shoulder.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of movement going on. There's a lot of work going on. So the flavor's gonna be 10 times as good as this would be right here.
I can't tell you how many times I've gotten a flat iron steak and it still has that silver skin in the center. Like, it's so rare to actually see it butchered properly.
Well, at Porter Road, we tried to do everything we can to make sure that we give you guys the best chance for success with dinner. Our next one we have here is called the Terrace Major. Terrace Major is also a super unique cut. It sits on top of the clod or your arm roast. And this muscle, we actually cut the entire shoulder completely different just to get that 3/4 of a pound steak out. So we spend an extra 5 minutes trying to get this cut out because it's that delicious.
See, whenever I saw these, I always thought that this was the tip of
The tenderloin.
tenderloin.
Some people will call it a shoulder tenderloin.
Oh, okay.
There is a little bit of confusion around it. It is insanely tender, just like that. But you can see, even if you're looking at it, you can see the bigger muscle fibers in there.
Yeah.
Generally, when the bigger muscle fibers come into play, it's gonna be a little chewier. So this one is really delicious served on the rarer side.
So I want to grill one of those up. That sounds great. Where are we moving to next?
Now we can go.
A bone in.
A bone-in ribeye.
Yeah.
So the ribeye, like I was saying earlier, this muscle, the eye of the ribeye, is that same muscle that starts at your neck. Chuck roast, ribeye, strip, sirloin. All the same muscle as it goes down the animal, just depending on where it is. So the ribeye, you want to cook a little medium rare, medium, because you want to start to break down all that fat, start to juicing it up.
Got to render all this fat, otherwise you're going to be chewing on the thing for...
Exactly,
Yeah.
you'll be gnawing on it.
So what's the benefit to having the bone in there?
So the bone is gonna do a couple things. It does help protect the steak as you cook it. So if you're rendering your fat cap, like we always tell people to start your steak on your grill, like that, because you're gonna render your fat cap, and then you'll put it over there. So it'll protect that eye a little more than it, and it adds a touch of flavor. But the main reason to do it is to protect the steak, to make sure it stays delicious.
One of my favorite ways to do that, to get your steaks vertical like that, is to just skewer them through, maybe right through here, with like a long wooden skewer that you got like 3 or 4 of them, it just becomes a unit.
That's a great idea.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that. This next piece right here kind of comes from the middle. So I just threw it up there because it looked pretty. This piece is called a hanger steak.
Yeah, one of my favorites.
Pretty easy to understand why it's called that, because it hangs inside the cavity. Pretty simple. Cool thing about this, it's technically not a steak. It is part of the offal.
Oh, yeah, because this is one of those old chef cuts. That's,
It is one of those old chef cuts. It's part of the breathing apparatus.
Yeah.
It's an extremely hard-working muscle. You can see those muscle fibers. It is intensely flavored, just delicious, delicious flavor. But it needs to be cooked really rare. It needs to be sliced against the grain. Fun fact, out of every single steak we have in the animal, this is the only one you get 1 out of.
Really?
There's only 1 hanger hanging in the beef. Some people will cut down the middle seam. There is a tendon that goes down the middle.
I was gonna ask, how do you contend with this guy?
So we don't cut that out because then you end up with 2 really small pieces of hanger steak.
Yeah.
And I prefer to cook it whole, then slice that piece out, unlike the flat iron, because this, if it gets overcooked, is disgusting. This, the flat iron, if it gets overcooked, this is the one cut in the entire animal that still tastes good, well done.
Really? I would not have guessed, just because of the lack of fat in here.
But if you look at the muscle fibers compared to a different steak,
Oh,
you
they're so fine.
see how fine those muscle fibers are?
Yeah, they're barely there.
And then there's not much connective tissue because of where it's located, sitting on top of the paddle bone. So that's the one cut. If you have a family member that likes well done and you still like them, you can cook that for them.
I just make them smash burgers. That's
There you go, that's all you get.
What's next over here?
Yep, that's our next one. So those are short ribs. These are English cut short ribs.
My favorite. I don't
Yeah.
like the other. What's the name of the other style cut?
So there's Texas,
Yeah.
we call them Korean, or you can call them flanken cut.
Yeah.
And then there's also dino ribs, which is the whole rack.
Well, those are fun and all, but as far as just general cookery, this is my favorite. Just because if you're trying to make burgers out of this, it's very easy to isolate the meat. If you're trying to braise it, it's very easy to, just arrange it so the fat cap is up, and so the meat is submerged in the way that you want. Like, it's just.
And it's a perfect portion, as it cooks down. So with those different cuts we talked about, the English cut are gonna be the 3-bone, 2-inch long. The Texas cut are gonna be a single bone long cut. We do ours, it's 5 inches. And then the Korean or the flanken cut are gonna be a 1/4 inch across. And at our facility, we actually make our Korean short ribs out of the chuck ribs. So the first 5 ribs, they're a lot meatier, they don't have as much fat. And when you're doing that marinade quick sear, you don't have time to break down that fat.
Yeah.
But if I'm braising, I want a fatty piece of meat. That way it blends into that sauce, and then as we reduce it down, once again, that coating, that mouthfeel, that deliciousness. So short ribs, these particular ones come from your 7 through 12 rib on your rib section. We cut them out, we trim them up. These are amazing for slow cooking. Obviously, they're on the rib section. They're a tougher piece of meat. So when they're cut thicker, they're great for smoking, great for braising, slow cooking. Render down that connective tissue, turn it into gelatin. It's amazing.
Fabulous. And then we have another cut over here that has gained popularity in recent years.
Absolutely. So these are our skirt steaks. We have our small skirt steak and our large skirt steak. Both very similar cuts. They're part of the breathing apparatus again. It's the diaphragm that actually breathes. So you can see extremely thick muscle fibers going on there. They're great for marinade. These are one of the cuts, like you said, they're gaining lots of popularity. Tons of great flavor if cooked correctly.
Yeah.
They're amazing and delicious. One thing about this cut that everybody does wrong is the way they cut it.
Oh, for sure.
Because you set it on your board and what do? You just go down, ba 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 ba. Completely wrong.
Show us how to do it.
All right, so what we would do is if we grilled this up, we would cut it into 3 pieces right there. So then we end up with those 3 pieces, and then we take it and cut against the grain. Your jaw will thank you for that advice.
Oh, yeah.
Because if you do there, you're cutting with the grain, and then you're gonna have yourself beef bubble gum, basically. To where you're just constantly chewing. And the problem with this cut too is a lot of people tend to overcook it because they don't have a hot enough grill or a hot enough plancha, and then it becomes well done, and nobody wants that either.
Right.
We're gonna jump over to my side over here.
All right.
So we went from chuck to rib. Now we're in the loin section. So we're at the 13th rib all the way to the H-bone, which is the hip bone down here. The whole tenderloin sits inside of the cavity of the animal. And with that, it doesn't do much movement. So that's why it becomes super tender, really thin muscle fibers. If I wanted to and I was crazy, I could stick my fingers straight through this, but I'm not crazy and I don't want to, so I'm not gonna do it.
Sounds awful.
But that's just showing how tender it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how much connective tissue there is not in there.
Yeah.
So what this cut does is it's delicious because it's tender. It is a crowd pleaser because you can put it on a dollar roll with some horseradish sauce and call it a day.
It's like French fries.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
delicious, and it's a vehicle for sauce.
Yeah, exactly. That's the best way I've ever heard it described. So when we cut our tenderloin into steaks, it becomes fillets.
Yeah.
So these are your filet mignons, and there's 3 different parts of the tenderloin. There's the head, the body, and the tail. So what we do is we tie it up so it's an even roast, so you can roast the thing whole. But if you were gonna break it down, you have your head, and there's actually 2 ears on it. So you can trim that down. You have your center part, which is called the Chateaubriand, which we've heard of too, which is basically a 1-pound center cut steak. So that's the filet.
And something to be aware of when you're just going to the grocery store and getting one of these is if you see that it's tied, it might be combining 2 parts of the cut like this. So if you're trying to make yourself little filet mignons, then just be aware if it's tied that it might be in 2 pieces.
Absolutely, that is, yeah, very sound advice. Another cause for concern, when you go to a big box store and you buy it in a bag and there's a lot of white in the bag, means both chains are still on there, the silver skin's still on there, and you have to trim it up.
Yeah.
So if the price looks too good to be true, it probably is.
You got to do a little extra work, but I think that's one of, it's sort of a rite of passage for a cook to go to Costco and to get one of them, whole primals and break it down into pieces, watch an Alton Brown video.
I've gotten phone calls from family members freaking out because they've done that.
Yeah, maybe just don't do that.
Yeah, just buy it from us.
Just come to Porter Road.
Just buy it from us. This cut right here is your strip steak. So this is actually a Kansas City steak because it has the bone in it. also known as a shell steak, or sometimes referred to as a Delmonico steak. So this is a bone-in strip steak. This is the other side of what would be a porterhouse.
Gotcha.
But this cut right here is the same muscle that starts up and goes all the way down in your loin section. Strip steak, classic, wonderful, delicious steak. Really good medium rare.
Now, something I've always been a little confused about is the very existence of porterhouses, because in my mind, you treat filet mignon a little different than you would New York strip.
I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
There are certain cuts that we do, that we process, that I don't understand that people still want. I agree with you. I would much rather treat each muscle unique as it is and treat it the way that it should be, because this cut is gonna be overdone by the time this cut is done.
Yeah.
And if this cut is done, this cut's gonna be dry and nasty.
Exactly.
So it's one of those things that if you cook it in a certain way, you can make it delicious if you do it, but
You really got to know what you're doing.
yeah. And like long and short, make your life easier. Just separate them out and cook both of them and cut them up and put them on a steak.
So, best way to cook this?
Best way to cook a strip to me, once again, start fat side up on there, grill it up, keep it medium rare to rare. This is a leaner cut than your ribeye, but once again, it's that same muscle that goes through it.
And you're gonna get sort of grassier, maybe more irony flavors here than you would.
You will get more irony flavor than you would from the ribeye, because the ribeye is gonna kind of be washed out by the amount of fat you have in there. Strip steak's kind of the crowd pleaser.
Yeah.
You're not gonna have too much fat to put people off, and it's not gonna be as boring as getting a fillet.
Let's taste the irony. I just realized I said that. Weird. All right, what's next?
So we will go ahead and go down, stay on the loin section. This piece right here, this is called a flank steak. Once again, really popular nowadays. You know, whenever the daytime TV cooking shows talk about it, because everybody runs into the shop and says, do you have a flank steak?
You have a flank steak?
Yeah. This cut takes really well to marination. It's really good, quick sear on a plancha or grill. It is from the belly section, so it does a lot of work, which means it develops a ton of flavor. Once again, you definitely want to cut against the muscle fibers.
Few things are more beautiful than a flank steak that you've cut on the diagonal, so you get these really wide pieces that are all just very short muscle fibers, and you just got this big, rosy, beautiful steak just all fanned out.
Oh yeah.
Few things are more gorgeous than that.
And we at our facility are not scared of fat, so you'll notice a lot of our cuts still have that fat left on there.
Sure.
A lot of places try to peel all that off. I think it's more delicious on there. It's gonna taste better. And when we talk about marinades, we're talking about something that's gonna help break down that connective tissue and that muscle fiber. So there's a couple different ways to do that. You can just add flavor by adding like oil and garlic and onions and things like that and herbs. But if you really, really wanna break this down, the best way to do it for a very short amount of time is using tropical fruits. Commercial meat tenderizer is made out of an extract called papayan, which you can probably guess where it originates from.
Pineapple.
Pineapple, yes. Papaya.
Oh, okay.
Pineapple has very high concentrates of it in it too.
Okay.
So that's why pineapple juice, you know, you'll marinate it in there, but that'll actually start to break it down. If you leave something like this in any kind of tropical papaya marinade overnight, it'll just be mush.
Dissolve, yeah.
Yeah, you'll have nothing left. You'll just have these like strings. So you want to be careful about how much you do it, but it also really helps break down things and adds a little bit of flavor, and those sugars from those tropical fruits when they caramelize on top of that steak with the Maillard reaction happening. Yeah.
I just had a breakfast sandwich, but I'm hungry again.
All right, so now we're gonna go to the tri-tip.
All right.
Tri-tip, super popular, super new cut. California barbecue is what it's most known for. They'll take it, they'll smoke it, and kind of grill smoke it. It'll go a lot quicker. So California isn't known for their smoking. They don't have a lot of hardwoods like we have down here.
Yeah.
So you're not gonna get a lot of that, you know, that cherry mesquite, stuff like that.
Sure.
It's gonna be a quicker smoke section. It's more grilling and trying to char it up.
And it looks like it's got plenty of fat content. Does it have the collagen content to support being smoked like that?
It does. So it does have connective tissue. It comes from the crotch region right here. This cut does take well to smoke, and you can, if you're, you know, it's the middle of winter and you don't feel like going outside, you can throw it in a crock pot too.
Really?
Like it does do well there, the fat content, the connective tissue, and cast iron skillet, real quick, keeping raw. cut it against the grain, chimichurri sauce all over it, boom.
Is this one of the few cuts that you could see either smoking or braising or just grilling? Like, it seems like a pretty versatile cut.
This cut is very reminiscent of that Denver steak that we have up there, to where it is very versatile. You can use it in many different ways, and it's not that well known.
Yeah, it's hard to find.
It is hard to find.
Yeah.
But that's why you have a place that's everywhere, like Porter Road.
Porter Road,
PorterRoad.com.
tri-tip, everywhere, when you can't be.
We'll meet you there.
We'll pick you up.
Now we're gonna go sirloin. This is the last of that muscle we keep on talking about that goes all the way down and comes down. Sirloin is the top of the rump. We were out on the farm yesterday and we were talking about looking at that tail end and looking for those bones. So this muscle is right in between the tail and that bone that we were looking at.
Yeah.
So when it fattens up, this piece is ready. Sirloin is a really delicious lean cut that has tons of great flavor.
Yeah.
The way we trim it is the way I would want to eat it. So we do something technically called a sirloin fillet.
Yeah, I was noticing this is not the typical sirloin that you'd find at the grocery store.
Yeah, I just feel that sirloin fillet is very misleading because you're adding that fillet word in there and then you get people confused.
You could have fooled me. I honestly would have thought this was a fillet.
Well, we just want to make sure, like I said earlier, everything we do, the way we butcher, the way we age, the way we raise it, is going to give you the ultimate chance for success, for impressing your friends and having an epic meal, no matter what you're doing.
So, this is what you'd see in the grocery store.
Yeah, so this is what you'd see in the grocery store. What we try to do is cut and create a chance for you to have an epic meal without having to do that much work.
Yeah.
So at the grocery store, you'd see a larger cut like this, even sometimes with the picana or the sirloin cap on top as well, which is another muscle here, which cooks differently, so we take it off. But what they do is they leave a lot of this silver skin in here in this connective tissue, and what we try to do is create to where it is one solid hunk of meat with just a little bit of fat in there. And what that's gonna do is create it to where you're not gonna have to trim around and cut. We sell it as the sirloin because this is the way the sirloin should be cut to us. So this is a tail called an oxtail.
Though it is not from
It is from a steer and a heifer.
ox. Okay.
Not from an ox. This cut is amazing, delicious braised down. You gotta cook it super long. Obviously, the tail is whipping around, whipping the flies off, walking around, waving because it's happy, all that type of stuff.
It's one of the more used muscles on the cow.
Yes,
Say, yeah.
one of the more used muscles. So it's gonna grow a bunch of connective tissue. It's gonna have a bunch of collagen built up there, and it's just braises down to like almost a marmalade.
Yeah.
Because you can braise it and it releases all of that. It's a little tedious. You have to go through and pick it. There's a bunch of bones that go out. But once you get that meat out of there in that braising liquid, that day's worth of work is all worth it. Put it in a taco. My favorite thing to do with it, put it on top of some risotto with a nice little like salad of some slaw or something like that. Add some brightness.
What do we use to make ossobuco?
So ossobuco is actually made from the shank.
Yes.
So the shank cut on a cross section is the ossobuco cut. Some people say that ossobuco should only be veal, which traditionally the ossobuco cut is from a young beef cow.
Yeah.
We cut ours, but we also cut pork ossobuco, lamb ossobuco. You can have ossobuco, it's the cut method. This one's a beef ossobuco. It has tons of great flavor. It braises down, and my personal favorite, if you cook it to perfection, all of this is super tender, and that marrow is left in that bone. Pick it up, suck it out at the end. Yeah.
Yeah. Now this is one of the more exciting things to make as a home cook. To take something that if you were to just grill this, you'd be like, this is disgusting.
Worst thing ever.
But if you take time and you know exactly what to do with this and how to manipulate it, you've got so many delicious things going on here, not least of which is the marrow.
The marrow. Now I want to sous vide it and then grill it.
It's good, boys.
Yeah.
Well, that's the whole cow.
Well, I have one piece that didn't fit on here. I'm gonna go grab it for
All
you.
right, cool.
This wouldn't fit on the tray.
Yeah, what do we got here?
So this is the beef brisket. It's the boob.
Okay, all right.
It's not gonna bite you. It's already dead.
I don't know why I thought you were just gonna mash my face in it. All right, so we got the brisket here.
So this is the beef brisket. This is the packer's cut, so it's pretty untrimmed. Gives the smoke master an opportunity to trim it down a little more to their liking. We sell them a little more trimmed as well if you don't want to do any work. The packer's cut is going to consist of two main muscles. So it's the pectoral muscle of the animal. So there's the flat, which is this large, big piece down here. And then you could see there's a little seam that runs through here, and you can see the muscles, two different muscles right there. The flat and then the point. So if you flip it over, nice. This is our point. Once again, you can see the fat seam. The point comes over the top of it. When you smoke it, you ideally want to leave them together because in between the flat and the point is this nice little fat cap going through the middle of it. Some people will leave it and they'll slice it across whenever they're done. Some people will remove that point. These will become your burnt ends. Nice little crispy pieces. This cut, amazing for the smoker. You can see the tons of fat on there, tons of great marbling in there, big, thick muscle fibers. So that means there's gonna be a lot of collagen, a lot of connective tissue, which is gonna break down, give you that delicious, delicious gelatin. And if you cook this thing right, you know, every Instagram video you see ever now of the juices coming out, that's basically what it is.
This is where Instagram gets its power.
Exactly. If you're doing something like this, it's about 12 hours on the smoker at 225 degrees. Wrap it once it hits about 160 degrees, so that way you trap that moisture in, because moisture starts to rapidly expel out of proteins at about 165 degrees. So if we capture it before it goes, it'll expel, but hopefully it gets sucked back up at the same time. So, delicious monster of a cut. Obviously it didn't fit on our tray, but that cut is gonna come from the front shoulder, the chuck section that we had there. Delicious, wonderful for smoking and all other wonderful slow cook items.
That's beef. I don't know. So something that folks can learn from what we've gone through here is that harder working, sometimes less expensive muscles have the most flavor.
Absolutely.
Like, and this is far and away the most, would you say this is the most expensive?
Absolutely. Hands down the most expensive.
This will run you generally, what, like 30 bucks a pound?
Something like this, if you go to, you know, a local store in New York City, you could be paying $50, $60.
Oh yeah.
It's 14-day dry age, just like everything we do, which normally demands a premium price, but at Porter Road, that's our standard.
Yeah.
That's what we do.
And you know, the real working class cuts, I love calling them working class cuts because these are hard working muscles. This is the diaphragm. This is, or not the diaphragm, it's
part of the diaphragm.
It's part of the diaphragm. And this works hard. And it is tough unless you cook it correctly. But if you do, it is full of flavor and it's full of texture and it's one of the better parts of the cow.
And one of these type of cuts, like you said, this is a status cut. This is what we call our designer cuts, our ribeye, strip, and tenderloin. Like you were saying, the working class cuts, the flat iron, it's the second most tender.
Yeah.
It's gonna be way more delicious. Teres major, you know, you go over these things. If you put a little bit of love into it, not even more work, just a little bit of love into it. You will create something amazing that your friends and family will think you're a genius because you know what a flat iron is, or you know what a hanger is.
Imagine how much cooler you'd sound serving to your friends and family. Here's some flat iron steak, here's some tri-tip versus like here's filet mignon. That's so 90s. Grass-fed versus traditional beef, what are we looking at? Flavor-wise, texture-wise, what can you expect different in grass-fed versus grain-fed beef?
Grass-fed's generally speaking here, is gonna be leaner and a little gamier. And by that I mean fishier flavoring, because what we associate with that fish flavor is the omega-3 fatty acids. 100% grass-fed beef is gonna be much higher in those omega-3 fatty acids, which is gonna give it that fishy flavor, which a lot of us consumers are not used to.
It's also gonna have that sort of darker, more purpley color to it sometimes.
Yes, so to get grass-fed beef up to slaughter weight and up to the fat that you would prefer, you have to raise them longer. So that's why grass-fed beef costs more money as well, because you have to raise them longer, you have to keep them around longer. One of the big issues with grass-fed beef is about 80% of our grass-fed beef we buy here in the United States is imported from other places.
What can folks look for at the grocery store when they're buying beef if they don't have the opportunity to buy from you guys? What can they be looking for to maximize their chances of success?
So, whenever it comes to grocery store meat, there's certain things that mean absolutely nothing. All natural. All that means is nothing was added to it after it was slaughtered. No dye, no coloring, no flavoring. cool, that shouldn't happen anyway.
Yeah, no.
So that should just be the standard.
Yeah.
But all natural, you know, not meaning much. Color of the package. Just because the package turned from red and white to green and yellow doesn't mean that it's better for you. It's just better marketing, better advertising.
Yeah.
And then you go into the world of organic, pasture-raised, grass-fed, all of those. There's certain things that are regulated in certain ways. Your best bet is gonna be to try to go with a butcher that you can understand and know. If you don't have an opportunity to understand and know and you're looking at a bunch of styrofoam packages, organic is always gonna be your best bet. It gives them a little more regulation, but still, you can still have a concentrated animal feed operation that is certified organic. So there's lots of things to be concerned about. And when we talk about going to the grocery store and seeing all these things, just because you see the orange great on the grill sticker, don't believe them. Because if you see a sirloin tip, that's the knuckle, which is the thigh. Just because the butcher's putting the grate on the grill sticker doesn't mean it's good. And then grading is another big thing that you see there. Prime, select, choice. Really, all that's talking about is the fat content inside of it. And it doesn't always mean that it's gonna be a quality steak. It doesn't always mean that it's gonna be a good steak. It just literally means that it has a lot of fat in it. You can fatten up an animal in a really horrible way and it cannot taste good, but it can grade out well. So there's really, buy from a trusted source, understand what you're doing, you know, and if you can't find something like Porter Road offers, you can't find something delicious, you know, it's not always the worst case to say, I'm gonna eat a vegetable because I can't find quality meat.
If you can't find Porter Road, eat a vegetable.
Eat a vegetable.
All right, well, thank you so much for walking us through everything today. I know I learned a lot, and I'm also very hungry. Can we grill one of these up real quick?
Absolutely.
Let's do it.